All right, back with the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop. 7-Eleven coming up later on this hour. We'll talk with Tiger Joyce from American Tort Reform Association about Illinois elevating its status on the list of judicial hellholes. We'll also connect with Police Chief Kenny Winslow to talk about some of the threats that have been made against area schools. So that's just some of what's coming up here. But of course, anytime you need to get a hold of me, you can do so, bishoponair@gmail.com, or you can find me on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. Just search out Bishop on Air, or you can call in live and local here at 217-629-7970. Whole lot of different types of headlines that we definitely need to get through coming from Illinois. And Illinois, of course, lost population in the past 10 years, but we're still one of the most populous states, right? We got a lot of population here, about 12.8 million, I think, but we did lose our status when it comes to being the fifth most populous state to the sixth, I believe, one of only 3 states that lost population in the last 10 years. So there's a lot going on in Illinois. And one of the things that's going on, of course, up in Chicago, you've got jury deliberations beginning with the Jussie Smallett case. We've been touching on this off and on since the case began just, a week and a half ago. And there was indication it would be a short trial, week and a half or so. And now here we are, and the jury has their orders, and they are in deliberation. So they could come out today with a verdict against Jussie Smallett. But he says that he was the victim of a hate crime. Police investigating that back in 2019 said, nah, actually the evidence shows that you orchestrated a hate crime. So the prosecutors laying out in closing arguments yesterday that the jury of Jussie Smallett is going to be taking into consideration all the evidence they provided. The testimony from the Osendero brothers, who Smallett allegedly paid to help make a hate crime hoax. And the Smallett brothers, or the Osendero brothers, I should say, testifying in court to that effect. And then you had Jussie Smallett take the stand, where he tried to paint one of the Osendero brothers as a lover and somebody who provided prohibited natural steroids or something to that effect. I don't know. I wasn't in the courtroom, but some of the reporters indicating some fascinating things that were said. But Smollett's defense attorney laying out arguments that the Osendero brothers are, quote, sophisticated liars, and ultimately saying that another possible motive, the defense says, was that the one of the brothers wanted to be hired as Smollett's security. So we'll see exactly how that plays out. Meanwhile, yesterday was a hearing for police immunity and whether or not state lawmakers are going to look at possibly doing away with qualified immunity. What qualified immunity is it's a measure of sorts that allows for police officers to conduct themselves in certain situations without the threat of possibly facing civil litigation as an individual, as long as they're performing their job within their understanding of how exactly they're if they are understanding what they're doing is within the constraints of recognizing somebody's civil rights. So we'll get to a little bit more of that coming up. But first, a phone call at 217-629-7970. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
Greg, the way you described that, it sounded like a Lifetime movie, the story of a jaded lover.
I'm telling you, I cannot wait for somebody to get the full transcript. I'll make it a summertime project if I have to. But I want to see a reenactment of what went on in that courtroom.
Who's going to play Jussie Smollett?
Well, I have to find somebody who's French.
Yeah, well... good luck, Greg.
Appreciate that. All right, it is the WMAY morning news feed. And, of course, as he did, you can chime in at any time, live and local at 217-629-7970. All right, so a task force with the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority stalled out yesterday trying to advance proposals to the General Assembly on whether people can bring lawsuits against individual police. So the Task Force on Constitutional Rights and Remedies, it's a group of lawmakers and stakeholders and law enforcement and civil rights groups. It was created as part of a recent sweeping criminal justice reform bill that passed earlier this year, if you recall, pretty contentious. Late in the previous General Assembly in mid-January. Law enforcement groups sounding the alarm, not happy about it, brought about a whole bunch of different things. But one of the things that they were trying to do was to tackle qualified immunity. This concept, this legal concept that provides a shield of sorts for certain law enforcement conduct. So they had 17 recommendations spelled out that the task force was set to take up during a 2-hour hearing yesterday. And the task force voted on one. It didn't pass. They then voted on another, and it didn't pass. These two ideas were complete opposite of each other. One would have said, we're not doing anything. Another one said, we're going to pass the Bad Apples in Policing Act, which would allow for individuals to bring lawsuits against the likes of individual police. But some of the other recommendations that were in there of the 17 included opening up immunity for all government actors, not just police, but a variety of other things as well. So once they found that they didn't have consensus moving in one direction or the other, they decided that they were going to hold off. And here's the ACLU's Peter Hanna talking about how they need to take their time with this. Because in particular, when it comes to why this task force was created, it was created because they removed the issue of qualified immunity out of that sweeping criminal justice and police regulation bill. So here's Hannah talking about reiterating why they're there in that committee.
I would just remind everyone that that's sort of why we're all here in the first place, and I think any attempt to rush through does a disservice to the great work of ICJA, this entire task force, and of course the people of the state.
So State Representative Justin Slaughter, who is leading the committee, he oversaw a new motion to essentially delay things and recommend that the committee, the task force, streamline the suggestions and proposals.
Have further discussion and recommend to the General Assembly that we move the date of the report, the task force, back.
So that task force has a December 31st deadline. It sunsets then. State Senator John Curran, a Republican on this task force, says that they need to plow through and actually get some recommendations. They can't continue to find extensions.
To go back for a third request for an extension, this is not looking reflective of the work that's been done.
So it's unclear when the group's going to meet again and whether they're going to meet their end of the month deadline. Something else that's happening today is a legislative audit commission, and they're set to review a variety of different audits. One of them deals with a compliance audit of the Illinois State Police, which raises all kinds of questions and findings that the Illinois State Police compliance examination for the previous 2 fiscal years found improper controls over equipment. They urged state police to immediately access property and assess whether the property that may have been lost may have contained confidential information. They say 92% of the items they tested, auditors tested, found that it could have had confidential information on those items. Another finding found that $2.3 million of unknown activity in the ISP's record keeping and a variety of other findings. But another finding that's going to be in front of the Legislative Audit Commission is the ongoing issues of the FOID card and the backlogs that there were. Now, the backlogs have lasted more than a year in some instances, and a test sample of FOID applications found that 87% of FOID cards weren't being processed in a timely fashion with up to a year of delay. 60% of renewals weren't being processed within the time allowed by law. And they also found that state police wasn't able to provide sufficient receipts for more than $7 million in FOID card fees. When it comes to CCL, 43% of concealed carry license applications weren't processed within the constraints of the law. State police have said this week, before this Legislative Audit Commission hearing, that they've done a lot to reduce the backlog. And the backlog's been reduced from around 140,000 people that weren't getting their cards, now down to around 8,000 or so. And they say that they're getting them done within 38 days. But I talked with Gun Save Life founder John Bach, and he said ISP's focus on this, it's definitely showing some results.
Up until recently, has done a fairly poor job of keeping up with the workload over at the FOID section. But they're doing better. That's the good news. The bad news is we still got a FOID card.
Now, while auditors say some people waited up to a year, Bach said some have waited well over a year. And there's not much relief for those who have their rights denied or delayed.
People can't really go to court on it because the suit will be moot before the court ever has a hearing on it. So people have really no place to go other than just to wait for the state to finally catch up when it comes to fulfilling their duties under law.
So we'll see what the Legislative Audit Commission ultimately delves into with that audit, but they're also looking at Northeastern Illinois University and a compliance audit of Chicago State University during an audit commission hearing today. New numbers out from the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability, but regardless of how you cut it, Illinois' unfunded public employee pension obligations that taxpayers are on the hook for, it's increased by more than $120 billion in 25 years. And the governor's office advising against changing the funding goals to 100% as actuaries are recommending. So the most recent report from COGFA, it's the November report, and it found that there were nearly $140 billion of unfunded pension liabilities driven by the teachers' retirement fund of more than $80 million. But if you look at it based off of market value of assets, the commission says the overall liability drops by $10 billion thanks to increased performance of the rates of return on these investments of tens of billions of dollars. But even with that more realistic valuation, COGFA says, the commission says in the past 15 years, the unfunded liability has gone from $42.2 billion to $130 billion. That's just in the last 15 years. In the last 25 years, it's actually increased by $120 billion. So interesting reports to see there. And also in this report from COGFA, it talks about the importance of an actuary saying that they need to get to 100% funding, not 90%, 100%. That's the best way to have a healthy pension fund is 100%. Right now, Illinois' pension funds are between 42 to 46% funded. Not even close to 90% funded, not even close to 100% funded. But a letter from Governor Pritzker's director of the Office of Budget and Management said an increase in the goal would result in higher payments, but eventually lead to a reduction in the unfunded liabilities in the system. Given the current fiscal pressures facing the state, this too is advisable to consider until Illinois can eliminate the unpaid backlog. So they're not advising to bump it up to 100% fully funded pensions. So those are just some of the things that are happening in the state of Illinois. Something else that happened yesterday is casino expansion. Governor J.B. Pritzker making the rounds in southern Illinois, taking a look at various casinos. He was in Walker's Bluff at a winery down there, cutting a ribbon and doing a bit of celebration of gambling in the state of Illinois. Here's the governor.
Part of our economic development plan for Southern Illinois, just one piece of it. And really, I'm excited not only about the project that's going to be built, but also about the community's involvement in it.
But you also have the approval of several other casinos yesterday, one in Waukegan and another one in the suburban area of Homewood. And Representative Bob Rita, who spearheads a lot of the gambling measures at the State House, he said that it's been a long time coming for this type of expansion.
Everybody wanting to have this right away, that they take their time and they make sure they do it right and vet these applications to make sure that who's getting awarded these are going to actually be able to build these.
All right, so that's just, again, a review of some of the things that have happened in the past 24 to 48 hours here in the state of Illinois. All right, now 7:25 coming up.